Ready? Good. So, Kelly, that was an unusual day in Virginia Beach. There was snow on the ground and snow that I could slide on when I was driving. Do you remember that?
But you're not the one that slid.
Right. So we had we were scheduled lunch at Loschenborn, and you were you riding with Mark, or who was driving? You or Mark?
I was driving.
Okay. So and I said, okay, well, they're closed because of the snow. So I said, follow me to Aldo's. And Aldo's was like not even a mile. But
Right.
we went over that little bridge, that little overpass,
Right.
and he had a big SUV or something, and he was sliding and
I did a
sliding along.
complete 360.
Wow.
And you were like Richard Petty. You didn't just go over the Enterprise, you flew over the Enterprise.
Well, I grew up in Buffalo. I love driving on the snow so much that in the few times we have a snowstorm in Virginia Beach, I volunteer to go pick up employees and bring them in and take them home, just because I like sliding along on the snow. So you grew up in the South, though, right? Where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school actually in the Virginia Beach area for Tab High School. So
And
south.
then where'd you go to
Before that,
college?
I was in the mountains of Virginia, southwestern Virginia, very
Oh,
close
so
to.
you got some snow there.
We did get snow there, yeah. And I remember one time as a kid, I helped the bus driver put snow chains on the tires
Wow.
on the side of the road so we could get to school.
Were there any overpasses where you might have fallen off?
There were a few bridges over some water.
Good. So how about college? Where'd you go to college?
I went to Liberty University in Lynchburg.
And your degree was?
Well, have a bachelor's of science in religion, world religions.
And one thing that impressed me when I met you is you had a side hustle. What involved gutters? What? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I had started working for my father and my uncle back when I was 15 years old in construction and doing gutters and siding and roofing and mostly exterior home improvements. And so I started when I went to college. I started that business as an extension of work, just to make some money and pay for my way through college. I didn't have a college fund. I did get a few scholarships, but yeah, I had to pay my way through college. So I did what I knew how to do, and that was work construction.
So how did you get business?
Um,
You're a college student. You're away from home, right?
right.
Hundreds of miles away from home. You are
I'm
going
19
to
years
school.
old.
And, okay, how many? 19?
I was 19 years old, and
Right.
we grew up in the southwestern part of Virginia. So we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't come from money, and my dad was a coal miner, and so everything that we did, we had to work for. And my dad, if he taught me one thing, it was how to have a great work ethic. And so I literally got my contracting tools, my equipment, my truck, and every day after class or between classes or on the weekends, I would drive through developments that were being built, and I would literally get out of the truck and just start estimating the work I could do on that job. And that's how I built a $500,000 construction business by the time I was 25, and I had 10 employees and doing quite well.
It was all new construction.
Most of it was new. There were some home improvement projects, but mostly all exterior work being done in the construction industry.
But you specialized in gutters or
I
multiple?
I had a couple of different machines that I had helped put together some special manufacturing on the machine, so we could do a large commercial application, the largest in about 5 states. So I had work in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina, for large roofing contractors. And so I developed that out. I bought a license called Englert Leaf Guard. I bought that license when I was 21, and that helped bring another product line to our business. And when I was 26, I was actually going to play golf with a preacher that was visiting our church. And the pastor of our church said, "Hey, does anybody know how to play golf? Would somebody take the visiting preacher this weekend to play golf?" I don't know if I've told you this story or not.
No, I don't remember the story.
And we're passing by my business. I had all my construction stuff in my, place of business. And we're passing, so that's my business. And he knew that I was making plans to move back to the Virginia Beach area. And he said, "What are you doing with your business?" I said, "Well, I'm just going to close up shop." And he said, "This is the best day of golf you could ever have in your life because of the lesson I'm about to teach you. Have you heard of equity?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got some equity in a home that I bought a few years ago." "Well, don't you have equity in your business?" And I said, "Well, who's going to want to buy my construction business? But the business is me." And he kind of walked through a couple of different scenarios with cash flow and with equity. Remember, my degree was in religion, not
And
business.
this is a pastor, not a financial planner.
This is a pastor, a visiting pastor from Louisiana, that had come up to minister at our church. And so, very valuable lesson, because the next day I went to my largest contractor and said, "I'm selling the business." And he said, "Well, I already pay you $80,000 a year. Why don't I buy the business from you?" So it worked
So
out.
the first request, you got an offer.
Yes. I mean, we negotiated through it, but yeah, after about 3 months, and that's when I moved back to the Virginia Beach area and met you.
Did you get it all paid for at once, or did you get payments over time?
Payments over time. Yeah.
So now you're looking for your next career. You undecided what you're going to do next. You were incredibly successful entrepreneur for 20 in your early 20s. You had your degree, and you could become a pastor. And now you're looking for your next career. And you found me, and we had lunch, and I offer you a job?
You did.
Okay.
You offered me a job, and I was ready to jump all
And
in.
I think at some point you got an offer for, was it the New York Times?
Yes, I actually had a little option to work for the New York Times, and so I did take that option. And it was funny because I had started working for you part-time because of the seasonality of the business we were in, and the development side of the business really kicked off in May. So this was in January when the job was offered. I went to work for the New York Times and in their facilities management division. And so, you said, "Well, what's the matter? You don't believe that we're going to be successful? Why do you want to go work for the New York Times? And where's that going to get you? Like, where do you want to be?"
The way I recall it is we had dinner at, again, last year board, where we had tried to go for lunch. And you were unconvinced yourself, but you're also trying to convince your wife.
Right.
that because we both offered you a full-time job, and you had to make the decision because franchise development starts after the tax season, and it was about the same time they wanted to come work full-time. And you remember what I kept saying to you over and over all night?
Isn't working for the New York Times kind of like working for the government?
Right. I said it over and over. And then I was applying to your entrepreneurial spirit. And I said, I mean, you work for the New York Times. Yeah, that's security. But what's the upside? What's the upside? Guess how many people get rich working for the New York Times? Or
Right.
I guess working for the government, right? It's like working for the government. Are you really cut out to be a government employee? So I was just saying that over and over again. I'm not sure that I got to your wife, but I was able to convince you, I think, right? Did you start right away with us, or did I forget what happened?
Yeah, I think it was about a month or so later. I came on board full time, and I did okay as an employee, but what I really liked, in the franchise development world, you're looking at the business opportunity and you're going, gosh, if that guy can do it, he's successful, if I can do this too. And so what I really loved about that was the fact that I could be an entrepreneur inside of a corporation, and work inside that and kind of grow inside that and really flourish inside of that environment.
So at some point early on in your career, you brought on a high school friend. Was Trey Powell a high school
Yeah.
friend?
Yeah, we went to junior high and high school together.
And he was a Dale Carnegie instructor.
Right.
So he had that outgoing personality, could teach people to do public speaking. So, and he came to work for the company in the same department that's franchise development.
Yes.
And I've said this 5 million times, that no one listens, no one follows the system. And I don't know if you remember this story about Trey Powell, but you went out and became a franchise, and so did he. When he went out he acquired an existing location in Hampton or Newport News on the peninsula. And he had heard me say dozens, if not hundreds of times, no one listens, no one follows the system. You got to follow the system. You got to follow the system. And he went and took he acquired a location that was average. It was not, it had been there about 3 years, and it was perfect. It was a perfect scenario, because he went in and said, the guy who was average said to Trey, they're going to tell you to do this, but do this. They're going to tell you to do this, but do that. They're going to tell you. And so he had his list, his top 10 list of things not to listen to. So fortunately, Trey believed me more than him. And he had great success, doubled the business first year, and had great success there. So that was him. Now, and that was a great story about following the system. I just love how that proved it, that here's the guy. The guy that owned the business wasn't dumb. He was educated. He was successful. He was a successful business guy, but he just wouldn't listen. And so about that same time, how did you get into the franchise world, becoming a franchise?
Yeah, so similar experience. There was an available territory near where I lived, and it was an existing store. And so I went in and took over the store. Then there was a kiosk opportunity available in one of the malls. And initially the territory was not available. And that opportunity popped up for me. So I took that as well and opened up 2 locations my first tax season with Liberty Tax. And we did quite well, and went on to then use that as a kind of a springboard for the area development program and become an area developer. And for the time we started that, I think in maybe December of 2002.
So after a couple, did you own a location after 1 year or 2 years?
Within my first year.
Okay. So you acquired a location, he acquired a location, and then what happened to each of those locations?
So
yours and his.
I ended up selling mine to an employee, and she continued to grow that business. And then I reinvested that money in South Carolina as an area developer with Trey. And I think between our stores in the Hampton Roads area, we were doing double the volume of the stores in South Carolina. And after our first tax season, we went down and doubled the volume of business there as well.
So you had 3 locations in between you in Virginia, near the Virginia Beach area, and then you sold those. Did he sell his store too?
He kept his stores for a while, but ended up selling them to family and another neighboring franchisee. So
you acquired most of the state of South Carolina?
Right.
And do you remember how many offices there were when you got there?
We had 5.
5? Yeah, and they were smaller combined than the 3 stores that you guys had up here?
Right.
And then when you peaked there, how many locations did you have in South Carolina?
We had 104 locations in South Carolina, including our seasonal kiosks. And we were doing about $11 million in volume.
Do you think it's an interesting story about the partner you brought in South Carolina?
It's interesting in a lot of ways.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what happened. Was he an initial investor?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Without mentioning any names, you want to talk about that situation and how you found an investor, and he surprised the heck out of me. But
Yeah.
He's one of the few guys that, I'll say this, that I went in and he said like first meeting, I'll take 50 territories. So, I mean, he was just like, right, straight up front, matter of fact, I don't want to hear anything. I'll take 50 or something like that. And I said, no, and then I put him in touch with you, and you guys made a deal with him.
Yeah. So he ended up doing 25 territories. It was an all cash deal. And we had, at that point, then we had a lot of higher expectations. And so Trey ended up moving there full time to help assist. And then you called me at one point and said, get down and help your partner. It was right in the middle of tax season. And it's always interesting. You said earlier, you're the numbers guy, and the access to the data and the way you filter through it. I was sitting at home, working from home that day during tax season. You called and said, you need to go help your partner in South Carolina, like today. And you knew the numbers before I saw them at the end of day report, and went down to South Carolina and again, opened up, we opened up so many stores, and we expanded in Kansas City the following tax season.
So before we get to Kansas City, you started with 25 in South Carolina, and then you grew to how many territories because you had 104 locations. So
yeah,
how many territories?
It was approximately 90 territories.
Okay.
For the 104 locations during our peak.
Okay. And then was it just the next year you expanded into Kansas City?
Yes.
Okay. So how did that come about?
I brought on a franchisee in Wichita, and he was the first franchisee that I awarded and worked with for the state of Kansas, as well as my first franchisee. And he actually just called me last year, and I helped him exit and sell his Liberty Tax franchise location after 21 years.
Was that Chris Merchant?
It was Chris Merchant.
Okay.
Yeah. So I partnered with Chris and my existing company, and we expanded in Kansas City. We had zero.
So Trey was part of that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So we had 0 locations, and we opened up 14 locations that next tax season, and right in H&R Block's backyard. And we went from 0 to 14, and it was like going from 0 to 100 miles an hour. It was fast and furious, and a couple superstars came out of that group. Some very well-known superstars in franchising. I think you've been on one of his podcasts.
Yeah. Well, Eric, I've been on 2 of Eric's podcasts, and 3 weeks ago he was on with me on this call.
Oh,
so he was there that first year.
Yes.
And was it just good fortune that you opened that many locations? You were right place, right time, or what did you do to facilitate that?
Well, we had a deal with the retailer, Walmart, and we had to sign up for locations. And so we signed up for every single Walmart that we could get, even though we hadn't sold the territory, hadn't awarded it to a franchisee. We signed up for it. So we were forced, like we put ourselves in a situation that we had to perform. And so if it wasn't going to be a franchisee, it was going to be myself or Trey, boots on the ground, running a tax franchise inside of a Walmart kiosk. So we had no option. It was burn the ships.
Was Corey Hughes there that year too?
Yes, Corey Hughes was there. Another very interesting story, Corey. You said all the time, follow the system, trust me, take my advice. I've been doing this, a really long time, very successfully. If you don't listen to me, just open your wallet and throw your money out. If you're not listening, you're not succeeding. And so we went out to Kansas City for a site selection. You always say, look, nobody in the country knows this business, knows the tax business like I do. Let me pick out the sites. So I went out to pick out Corey's sites, and he picked out this tiny little space in the back of a little shopping center hidden by the businesses in the front. And I said, why are you going there? There's a White Castle available right here. And he said, oh, I can't afford that. And I said, well, maybe we can get it subdivided. Maybe let's make a phone call. And so we got all the information. We got it, the landlord to reduce the size. And you said, you would approve the deal. And that's what helped springboard Corey Hughes's success in doing, 1,600, 1,700 tax returns his first season.
Yeah, we had essentially zero brand name in Kansas City, right? And he went out and set the record of 1,600 returns in it. Can you imagine 1,600 customers in his first season in 105-day tax season? It was just an immense success. And why was he successful? One reason was he followed the system and picked the location you told him, right? And then that probably doubled his number of returns, right? And that, as I recall, that was on an exit from an interstate, right? And so it was very busy traffic count. And one of the things, how do you do with his Lady Liberties and Uncle Sam's?
Oh, he had them on every corner, 3 to 4 out at a time during the peak driving times for sure. He took his costume folks out to do the business to business, delivering all the goodies and coupons and flyers to the neighboring businesses. He was religious about that daily.
I think I asked him just after that first season, I said, how many, because he wore the Uncle Sam costume. And I said, how many days during the tax season did you wear the Uncle Sam costume? He said, every day but Easter. Every day but Easter. Did you know Eric in church before he went to Kansas City?
No, okay. No. But we both were enrolled at Regent University about the same time. Yeah.
Okay. So now you're in South Carolina, and that's growing exponentially. You're in Kansas City, best area that we ever opened in first year that we ever opened that many locations. And the great news, it was the home of H&R Block, right? You did it right in that's where they had the biggest market share of anywhere in the country, because they've been there since 1955. That was their, they were there in 55, and then in 56, they expanded New York City. So they were in 2 cities, but that's their home. And you went there and kicked their butt and had a great season. And so do you remember how big that Kansas City got in terms of number of locations?
Well, we had multiple markets in both states. I think Kansas City, we got up to about 35 locations.
So state of South Carolina, 104 locations, Kansas City, 35. At some point, then you expanded again.
Yes.
Okay. And
yeah.
how much after that year did you expand? I mean, how long was it before you went to your next venture?
Well, before Mark Johnson put a moratorium on my expansions.
He did what?
Before
a moratorium?
Mark he put said, a moratorium. No, more expansions for Kelly.
He tried that? How did that work for him?
I don't think it worked that well, but he's on the call. He can pipe in.
He may have tried to, but I probably overrode that. Right? So it's funny you mentioned that, because on a call earlier today, internal mentoring, I was saying one of our principles is just say yes, just say yes, just say yes. And I hate it when people come up with rules, and Mark will explain himself before this call's over. I'm sure he'll tell us why he wasn't wrong. But for example, one of my employees came to me one time and said, or one of the franchisees said that they wanted to expand. They wanted to open 2 or 3 offices, and the internal support person said, no, you can only open 1 office each year. We'll only let you open 1 office. And he said, look, I'm proven, I'm successful, blah, blah, blah. And I went to the employee and said, here, you need to find a way to say yes. And why would we not let him open 2 locations? Well, we would be fearful that he'd be going too fast. And so I said, why then? What would he need to show us that we would feel confident that he could succeed? And the employee said, well, he'd have to have enough money and he'd have to have enough employees. And so so I said, exactly right. So instead of saying, no, you can't open 2 or 3 offices, say, we normally only recommend 1 because of finances and management and employees. But if you can show us the financial wherewithal and the employees, then you can open as many as you want. And so, yeah, I think I spent much of my career telling people to go slower because I found some people just try to go too fast. So maybe that's Mark's explanation. But so he put a moratorium on the Kelly Wyatt Express freight train. So how long did it take before you expanded?
So after that season, you had Andy Banker on the call last week. I brought Andy Banker in as a franchisee in Kansas City, and so he did a phenomenal job, as you know, and everyone who listened to the call knows. And so Andy and I worked together with a guy in Texas, in Paris, Texas, and Bob Metzger came in. He was already a proven entrepreneur in different franchise organizations, as well as a successful finance guy. So we partnered with Bob and bought, parts of the Rio Grande. We expanded in the Dallas market and in some areas of the central coast of California. And
wait, all in the first year, or was it gradual?
That was gradual. Our expansions with Rio Development were gradual over a couple of seasons. And I mean,
and there was 3 partners?
3 partners.
Bob, Andy, and you?
Yes. Yeah. And I had some health issues in between, so that slowed me down a little bit. But Andy took the ball by the horns with Texas and just ran with it. And
now, how did Trey? Do you remember the discussions we had about Trey didn't want to go along, right?
Right.
He didn't want to expand anymore. He was satisfied with just Kansas City and South Carolina. So how did those discussions? How did they pan out?
I mean, the train's going to move, and we're going. You get on board or you get off, and so we. Mark says you can expand with all that money you had.
No, he put on the chat, he could expand if you had dollars, if you found a new partner with cash.
So yeah, I mean, what it did do is it kind of bore some internal competition. And so we would sort of compete with each other. Andy, in Texas, and I would oversee most of the Kansas City operation, and Trey would oversee South Carolina. And so, we would make bets, and whoever's region did the most tax returns won the bet. And for one year, Trey said, well, I bet you that, and I like my hair. It's a little gray these days, but back then it was not as gray. And Trey said, we can shave each other's head. Whoever loses, the other gets to shave your head at the convention.
At the convention in front of hundreds of people, thousands of people.
Thousands of people. So we had that bet, and Trey lost. So he had
So
to
you
get,
went up on stage in front of thousands of people and shaved his head.
yeah,
Did you
yeah.
shave your head in sympathy or?
No, now the next year, I lost.
Okay.
He went out and got a few more customers than me. And Andy Banker was like, I'm not in this bet. I'm not doing that one. But yeah, it was, it was good after, I think. So you always said, we get complacent. And when complacency sets in, we either have to we have to fight through that, or we have to have a good mentor to challenge us, in that environment to help us coach us up and out of that complacency, or we need to move on and find something else you can be excited about. I think one of the things that I always have enjoyed is the your ability to get people excited and get people on the train and moving in that direction, and giving people opportunities to prove yourself, opportunities to succeed. And when things aren't going that way, people still have an opportunity to be exceptional somewhere else.
Yeah, when I think about your career, and you can tell me it appeared to me that starting when you were building your construction business back when you were 20 years old to 20 to 25, and then when you built your offices, your two offices, then when you expanded to South Carolina, then you expanded to Kansas City, then you expanded into throughout Texas. And it seemed to me that was the fun part. And that was where you excel. Some of us, and I think I'm the same way, that if I'm not in an environment that is challenging and I have an opportunity to change the world, make it a better place, then it doesn't seem as much, that's for other people. How do you feel about
I mean, I think that some people really thrive in that type of environment, and I'm one of those folks. And I like to think that I do better with that type of environment, that type of business coach, who also allows me the opportunity to grow. And sometimes that means dealing with your own issues, like your own habits, your own insecurities. And I think you allow people to do the things they do well, to get better at that. But you also allow folks who have, I have weaknesses, everyone has weaknesses, and you helped me realize some of those weaknesses and then address them. And so, yeah, I mean, I think being in that type of environment for me was just amazing. And one thing that I'll add to that, you talked about shuttling people around. I had about halfway through my career at Liberty, I had a seizure, and I wasn't able to drive for 6 months. And so and I was leading the sales team at that time, and you circulated. You had someone circulate a spreadsheet. It was a sign-up sheet to take Kelly to work and bring him home every day. And so in 6 months in Virginia, I had someone on the team, an employee of Liberty, would come to my house and pick me up, take me to work, and then take me home that day. So thank you for that. Most companies would not have, and there was no working remotely back then. It just didn't exist. But that's the kind of difference the type of organization that you lead makes in people's lives.
And you each learned, and you developed friendships and learned on the way. And I'm sure there were lots of business talk, and so the company benefited in so many ways from that. But that was a scary time. And Mark pointed out there was no Uber back then, or Lyft, or anything either. So it was a scary event in your life. Did they ever find out what had happened?
No, I just had a crazy health problem, and it went away. It was there and gone. I think it was because I'd had 5 cups of coffee that morning, and I was an ultra at the time doing triathletes. And so all amped up on all kinds of, you know,
Right.
endorphins from running and swimming and all the caffeine, and my body just needed to burn off some calories. But yeah, they did find out that I had a brain when they did that
Oh,
scan.
good, good. Because I always wondered. So when you peaked, how many locations did you get to?
At our peak, my peak with the three different organizations, I would say about 170 active locations.
Uh, uh, Obviously a huge success, and when did you sell those locations?
So a little bit of a trickle off, starting probably back in 2012 and 13, and then started exiting since then. And my last exit with franchise ownership was in August of 2021.
So very, very recently. And
Yeah.
think about, have you ever thought back about, okay, because I don't like to do this. I hate doing what ifs. So I'm almost embarrassed to ask you what if. But have you ever looked back and said, what happens if I would have taken that job at the New York Times and not gone on this great adventure? Have you ever thought about that? And again, I never do. So forgive me for asking that.
I haven't really thought specifically about that question, but I think I know what the answer would be. And I would have gone on to do something entrepreneurial. It wouldn't have lasted. It wouldn't have been long term.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounded like that spirit was built into you with your dad and when you were 15 years old.
Yep.
So, and Andy was talking about health issues too, and God doesn't put anyone here to skate. We all face adversity, and your partner in South Carolina, he had huge health issues, and and Andy had huge health issues. It's life's a miracle, and life's too short. I'm going to turn it over to Bob Gappa. Questions for Kelly? And you're muted.
I was enjoying the question myself. I'll share it now. Kelly, it's great to know you and get to know you more and more at this period in your life. Has your motivations changed over time? And now, as you're 49, you've achieved a lot of your personal goals, I assume. To what extent do personal goals motivate your business decisions today?
Yeah, I think what I think about today with my personal goals is how I can spend more time with my grandson. I just had a grandson this past year. And so that changes things. And, you think about wealth and you think about, legacy. So for me, the next 20 years is going to be about legacy. Not that I haven't led or had have a legacy to leave, but I think the goals for me and the drive and the direction is the word legacy for the next 20 years.
How many people in your experience who end up being average are average because they just don't have personal goals?
I think that some people just don't know. They don't have the training, the skill set to write down their goals, to share their goals, and to be accountable to those goals. And so I think most people fail because they fail to plan. We've all heard that cliche. And if you're going to throw a spear at a target, and you don't know where that target is, you're going to hit it every time. You're going to fail. So you have to write your goals down. You have to share them and be accountable to them.
What?
And the folks that do, like most of the people in this organization, we just spent some time a few weeks ago going through our mission, our values, our goals, and we've written our goals down. We've shared them as an organization. So I think when you're in an environment where that's expected, then you have a higher reach of those goals.
Say some words around what legacy is as opposed to pre-legacy.
Well, I guess, when it's like beginning with the end in mind, and what, who was that did those sessions, begin with the end in mind? If you start with that and you think, what do I want to hear people say, when I'm gone, and what's my eulogy sound like? And, what is the legacy that my kids, my grandkids will talk about? And, what will they have as a result of my decisions today that impact many generations? And Stephen Covey, yeah, that's right. Thank you, Mike. Beginning with the end in mind. But yeah, so for me, that's the focus and the goals for the next few years, is to develop that legacy, continue to develop wealth, and have something that is also, for me, it's also spiritual, leaving a spiritual legacy behind for my kids.
You could easily have 40 years of productive life in front of you. Easily.
I hope so.
Are there actual goals that you would like to achieve in the next 40 years that will motivate you and sustain your motivation?
Yeah, some of the things that I'm planning now is my next business, and I'm sure, aside from my involvement with loyalty, it's going to be something around one of our franchise brands. And, developing again, most people in this country, how do they get rich? They build wealth by building business and being an entrepreneur. And so, for me, I love working at Loyalty Brands, and I love the hundreds of thousands of people's lives that we're changing and we're going to change. And that's also legacy, the idea that I get to help be involved in an organization that changes generations of lives. That's powerful.
That's great.
And that motivates me.
John, I can't get much of a better answer than that.
Yeah, that's powerful. Kelly, did you ever see the movie Pay It Forward?
Yes.
I love that movie. I mean, it was cheap to make, but it's such a great concept. I've experienced that, but when I saw the movie, I said, when people say, how can I thank you? And when I give them the opportunity, or like yourself, I've given you opportunity, I've coached you, I've mentored you, and people often come back to me and say, well, how can I repay you? How can I possibly repay you? And my answer is always pay it forward. Pay it forward. If we just do that, what a great place this world's going to be if everyone that's blessed and receives gifts and a success, if they just pay it forward, then it'd be a spectacular world here. So that's just pay it forward. And you've changed hundreds and thousands of people's lives and over the last 22 years, and continue to do so, because they're still prospering.
Right.
Some of the people you mentioned are even the Andy Bankers and the Bob Metzgers and the Trey Powells and etc. Those people are still prospering.
I still think Eric holds the record for the most Discovery Days attended and meals that we paid for.
He did. Was he your prospect?
Yeah.
I had him. He was on 3 weeks ago, and I told him he has the right. I bought him more meals before he became a franchise than any human being ever. I mean, he must have come, and he would, his job before it became a franchise was he just bought houses and rented. So he had very little work. So, and he had a good appetite. So, and he loved coming to our Discovery Days because there was cocktails, or he didn't care about the cocktails. There was food, there was a dinner, and he just loved the free dinner, every 2 or 3 weeks. So Anyone have questions on the call? You can put it in chat, or you can unmute and see if you have any questions for Kelly. You were totally comprehensive, Kelly. So any final words for today?
No, thank you. And I hope that I have many years to pay it forward.
Awesome. And as Bob said, you're middle aged. You have at least 30 or 40 years. So you have a lot more to do with your life. So thank you everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week. Thank you, Kelly White. Great. Have a great day.